if we have somehow drawn the conclusion that our awkward thing is somehow perceived as a negative, I think challenging that thought and being like, okay, what is the worst case scenario that could possibly happen if I just leaned into it and owned that as a strength, and looking at what is the best case, what do I have to gain from actually just allowing that to be my truth.
Welcome back to the Own Your Awkward podcast. I'm your host, Andy Vargo, and every episode we get into what has made our guests vulnerable and how they've learned how to own their awkward in order to live their best life. Stay tuned so you can hear every awkward moment in today's show. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Own Your Awkward podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, someone here from the Tacoma community who is bringing artists together with the community in multiple different ways. Also, an amazing friend and entrepreneur, partner of mine, Ali Bozic. Ali, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me here.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to have you on the show. It's been fun to watch your business and you grow and everything you're doing, and just, happy to get you out there in the world.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I feel like we've interwoven our fields in so many different ways. I feel really honored to finally have a moment to be on the podcast here.
Excellent. Well, we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to get to know you in a way that we haven't yet. We're going to get into your awkward in just a minute. But first, I'm mixing up the way I like to start and just get into something a little different. And
Okay.
I want to know what's something that really just motivates you right now.
Oh man, I was like really prepared for the positive stuff. Motivation. Okay. So as a therapist, I feel like this is something that I actually work with clients a lot on, and looking at that difference between motivation and discipline. And it's really tricky because I think psychologically speaking, we have this idea of like, oh, okay, for me anyway, I'm like, well, when I start to feel XYZ, okay, I think that's going to get me motivated, and trying to flip it around into just like getting into action, like doing a step, like doing the things that you think you would do if you were motivated, and then having that kind of backwards engineer the motivation in itself. So
yeah, so it's like you skip past the mental piece of the motivation and just start the doing.
Yeah,
knowing that that's going to create the motivation.
Basically, yeah. It sometimes gets complicated in my mind, but I think of it like any small step that I can take towards, like, because for me, I feel like sometimes my goals get a little bit nebulous and hard to pin down, like what is the next tangible step, and that can be really unmotivating. So trying to just reframe it as like, yeah, what is one small actionable step, and by doing whatever that one thing is, it's like, okay, now there is actually some motivation created, and it's just keeping that momentum. So
I absolutely love that. And I can relate to that, nebulous to-do list or all these actions that need to be done, because when you're running your own business or you're doing a project that's large, all the little things don't feel like they're moving the needle yet, but they all need to get done. Or sometimes it's like, where do I start? What do I do? And then that's exactly right. All of a sudden the motivation is gone, because if you don't see the result from the action, it's hard to keep tying the action to the reward.
Yes. No, I totally relate to that. And it is kind of cool then, yeah, to look back over an accumulation of time and see all the little things that have added up. But especially right now, yeah, I've just been doing things for a couple years and wanting to see like, okay, here's that big payoff, but just trying to break it down like, okay, I've gotten as far as I've gotten by just doing one little thing at a time. And sometimes it can be as simple as, staying consistent with like doing the open houses, trying to do that on a weekly event or weekly basis, make sure, we get out there and promoting those, getting different people together. And it feels like the small step, but it's a big piece of the puzzle.
Right. I've been on this kick. So I probably told you this the other day when we Ali and I get together for coffee every once in a while. So just full disclosure, like true local friend, entrepreneur, we're doing the accountability thing. And I probably mentioned this the other day, but one of the things that I've been driving everybody crazy with is I've been watching my stats. And in that frame of seeing things growing and seeing all the little stuff, I was frustrated lately because I wasn't seeing individual markers growing. But when I step back and look at a couple of my accounts as a whole, the growth is there. And I'm going, man, I'm not seeing it on the last three videos that I posted, yet my weekly viewership was up, or whatever, way that you're slicing things. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes we look to that one thing we did for that justification or that gratification, and then we're not seeing it in that. But when we step back and look at that bigger picture, like you just said, so do you like every Sunday you look at it, or or is it just when you need to? How do you kind of keep that in front of you?
Yeah, it is more of like I have my little checklists every day too, trying to go through all the little pieces of that. So small things on a daily basis, but yeah, I feel like taking the step back and looking at it from that bigger picture is a little bit more sporadic. I like that idea of being like maybe building that in more consistently, trying to have
Mhm.
like, okay, you take the step back, but like coming up at the end of the month or whatever that is, it's your moment to look at it all together.
Yeah, and it's not a practice that I do, but it's just as we were talking about it, I just started thinking, man, maybe that should be maybe a Sunday night or a Friday at the end of the day, or even once a month,
Yeah,
monthly and quarterly. Just what
yeah,
does the whole picture look like compared to 6 months ago? Because seeing that difference really is a new perspective on it.
yeah. I like it. Okay, I'll hold you accountable to
Okay, we're gonna do that.
that.
And if you're out there
All right.
listening, get on that train, comment, let us know how often you're doing it, or if there's a tip or a trick you can share, because that's we're all here to just help each other. None of us have all the answers, and that's um, one thing. I was on a live video, and a guy commented like, "Oh, you don't look like you have everything together. Why are you talking about discipline?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm not
Wow.
disciplined in this area, but I'm disciplined in this area, and I'm not preaching at you. I'm sharing what I've learned along the way." And
Wow.
but thank you for the comments and driving up my algorithm, because I love all the attention, whether it's negative or not.
That's really funny. Way to handle that. Yeah, very, very professionally.
Yeah, it threw me off because I'm not used to the trolls. Like, when you're small enough, you're in kind of your safe space, and so you're not exposed to strangers.
Yeah, yes. I'm
So,
still in my safe space a little bit, Andy. So,
all right, we're gonna find some trolls for you. So
oh, life goals. Thanks.
go easy on her. No, but yeah, it is interesting though, because I just had a couple things lately, and but yeah, I appreciate that. So Ali, we're gonna get into it. We're just gonna jump right in here and find out about your awkward. I am really curious. What is your awkward thing?
I know. You know what's funny? I was actually attending your talks at the Blue Mouse Theater.
Hmm.
And since we work with the same videographer, and I was talking to him, we were doing a little testimonial after the event. And so I said what I wanted to say, and it was really, really cool. And I was really blown away with the production and just everything that people were sharing individually. And so we kind of wrapped up, and then Carlos was like, "Okay, so what is your awkward?" And like I wasn't expecting him to like throw that back out there, but in that moment where I was like, obviously it was on my mind watching all the talks and the people present, um, but it still kind of threw me in that
Hmm.
moment. But I feel like that was a moment of authenticity, and just from my core I was like, oh, okay, I know what it is. But I explained it to him, and then I've had a little bit more time to really process through that. But there were moments throughout my life growing up, and then one in particular when I was probably like junior high, high school, where someone had made a comment to me, and not they weren't even being mean or rude, but about how how vanilla I am,
Oh,
and just more of an and I don't I just mean that in a very like benign way, like
right.
just kind of like vanilla, neutral. And
Mhm.
I took it to heart. It felt like it should have been an insult, but I really had to process that and come to terms with what that meant. As I'm doing my research on what it means to be vanilla, I'm like, do did you know that like vanilla is actually one of the highest selling ice cream flavors out there? So I'm like trying to like rationalize this in my mind. Like it can't be that bad. But but it felt like, oh man, like everybody wants to be some, I don't know, like what's a super fun exotic flavor, you
I don't
know? And
know, like super spicy or something. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm like, I can't even name one. But what I realized was vanilla goes with a lot of things. You know, it might
Hmm.
not be the star of the show, um, but it blends well, and it can go from different. You can dress it up, you can dress it down, you kind of like put it in all these different places, and it's still going to work okay. But kind of that idea of being like, yeah, vanilla or boring, I think was something that was always in the back of my mind
Mm.
for
You know,
therapy.
it's such an interesting observation too, because a couple of things there, like one that you mentioned vanilla and boring, and how I think there's a lot of times, I run into this with people who have who relate introverted to being shy, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're boring just because you're vanilla. You may come across or hold back or have that I can blend in wherever, I can be versatile, and maybe it's almost more camouflage or chameleon than vanilla. But
Oh,
that's an interesting perspective, and I really, you're making me think about the versatility of vanilla. And um so how did that feel like back then and versus now as you look on it? Do you look at it differently now with different life experiences versus younger when that came up?
yeah, I do a lot, and I think it has influenced my life in in a lot of different aspects. But my day job, so as a therapist, I think it's definitely played a role there. And then also as an entrepreneur trying to start a new business, I think that's also been a big factor for me because I look at the way the way I made that connection between like, oh, vanilla or boring or just kind of like, um, I knew that I never really wanted to be the star of the show, you know, and that
Mhm.
is kind of how I think of the vanilla. Like you might have your amazing triple decker chocolate cake or whatever the thing is, but like yeah, you have a little scoop of vanilla on the side because it kind of helps balance it out a little bit. But for some reason, I think I started attributing value to the other thing, the thing that
Oh,
was the main attraction, and having to really figure out how to challenge that thought, right? And like you're saying, really own the what is the value in the vanilla. And somebody, I know this is like a super famous quote, and I forget who actually said it, but um to be interesting, be interested. And I think
oh,
that
true.
really kind of stuck with me in terms of like this fear of like, oh, okay, like maybe I am just really boring. And then what does that mean, right? Are people not going to want to hang out or spend time or get to know me or whatever that is? And on the flip side, it's like, oh, actually, there is a lot of value in being the one that is actually just interested, and that could be in all different things, activities and things that are going on in the world, but also in people, and just being able to intentionally listen and get to know other people. And I actually really enjoy that more. And it's definitely makes sense in therapy. Like you're not really the star of the show as a therapist. You
Right.
know, you're facilitating and you are trying to work through other people's stories and other people's beliefs. And it's something that I think that comes more natural for me. And I really enjoy that.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's so important that you touched on there is where we think we need to place value based on certain attributes. And a lot of times there's, stardom and fame comes with being that person that's attracting, the Rocky Road or whatever the thing with all the
Yeah.
different flavors going on and the Ben and Jerry attributes. And yet that thing might get more attention, but that doesn't shouldn't shift the value that brings, because there's so much value to all the other attributes that are needing to happen in the world. And like you said, who wants to show up to their therapist that's talking about themselves the whole time? Like, what good is that gonna do?
I agree. I mean, I think that seems like a natural conclusion to make. But yeah, finding that right fit. Like for me, I do enjoy that. And I think that there is value in that. And as my day job, I think of that as kind of a compartment of my life, but also it really hit home starting this business, trying to connect real estate agents and local business owners and artists and musicians. It really gave me a platform to connect the stars of the show, right? The people
Right.
who are out there and doing really cool stuff. And it doesn't have to be me. Like I just get to um, kind of try to set the stage for that.
Yeah, it's so interesting hearing you say this, knowing you, and a lot of my guests I don't know that well. And so when I know somebody and we've worked together, to hear you
Yeah.
share that piece of yourself,
Yeah.
like light bulbs are going on in my head where I'm like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. This is why Ali is so good at connecting and putting other people center stage at these events that you put on very well, and you highlight other businesses amazingly, and yet you're not trying to be the it's all about me. I'm doing, it's not my event I'm doing. You're like, this is an artist event. I'm here, as the catalyst for it.
Yeah, I don't think I connected the dots specifically when I was starting this business, but it does make sense that like as I reached out in the very, very beginning, started doing some networking just to gauge like interest level, are business owners or artists, are they interested in doing, open house pop-up shops? And I was so adamant. I was like, I don't want my face on the brand. I don't want to be a part of like, I don't want to be me at all. It's just
I
connecting artists
remember
to other
that.
people. And like, I was convinced that like, this is solid. I don't have to put myself out there. And I did have to push back on that a little bit because I'm like, okay, it is my business. I do have to be the one that is out there, like explaining it to people and promoting it and like connecting the dots so people actually understand what the value is. But beyond that, really wanting to turn it back over and have other people kind of run with it and I don't know,
Yeah.
be the stars of their own event.
No, it's amazing to see it grow and transform, and to hear you talk about that perspective versus seeing you in action. Because when I see you behind the camera and on your reels and in the shows, which we'll get into in a minute, it looks like you're just a natural Hollywood star. Like that seems like part of your life. Like there's nothing vanilla that comes across when we see you in action. Um, so we're gonna you guys have heard us talking a little bit about this pop-up shop concept and pulling the artists together. We're gonna get into that in just a minute. Before we do that, I want to know, was there was there a time when you like how did people react when you started to really lean into that and not see it as a I don't have to change who I am? Or did you struggle with that for a while where you tried to be really spicy or be really chocolatey versus vanilla before
I
you
don't think
said
so.
no?
I would like to think that I'm self-aware enough that I would remember if I had that phase. I just don't think it, I don't know. I don't think so. I think there was maybe more negative self-talk about what it meant to be that way.
Okay.
And that's the part that has shifted because and honestly, again, being a therapist, it's really helpful for working through your own stuff, like just having all these different tools and
Sure.
strategies. Especially, I feel like cognitive behavioral therapy has been a big help in my own life, just being able to recognize the automatic negative thoughts that I'm having that I think probably like into my 20s, even my 30s, I didn't even question that it was my perception. It was just so natural. Like I just had these assumptions about who I was and what that meant about my place in the world. And finally realizing like, oh, well, this is a thought that I'm having. Like I can take a step back from that thought and actually look at how much power that thought has had, how much accuracy that thought has had. Is there a different way, to reframe that thought that's still true and accurate, but leads to a better emotional outcome or better behavioral outcome? Because I think I was letting that hold me back from a lot of things. Even starting a business, I think there was a belief for a while that if I wasn't that person who wanted to be, the main attraction, then like how could I start a business? Like it just seemed like there was such a mismatch there.
Right. Yeah, because there are a lot of, and I think bad advice out there on how you're supposed to be, quote unquote, as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And it kind of it puts people in a position of feeling like, well, if I don't have those personality traits, or if I don't enjoy those pieces of the job or those characteristics, can I ever be successful as a business? And granted, there are certain things that you may not enjoy that you have to come to terms with. Like, I don't like accounting, but I need my numbers to be right. Like, there's a certain
Right.
level of acceptance of getting through it. But as far as how you present to the world, how you choose to run your business, there's a lot of room for how you show up to the table.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. And I think having to look at myself, look at my truth, look at how I operate, who I am. And for sure, like I agree with what you're saying. There are areas where having to push back, like even just not wanting to have my face on any of the business. I'm like,
Mhm.
well, I could probably push myself out of my comfort zone because I realize that there is a value. Like it's probably healthy and good for me to do that. But at the same time, like not going to some extreme of like, well, now I have to be someone that I'm not in order to make this work. But
Right.
it did allow me to yeah, to test the waters and to just get out of my own head in terms of what I thought was possible
Mhm.
for my life. And I again I think the CBT, like the cognitive behavioral stuff, and just as these little experiments, right? Where it's like if I have this belief about who I am and my brain is drawing this whole conclusion, like, okay, well, if that belief is true, then what is the consequence of that belief? And what is the consequence of the next lower belief? And so kind of getting to this like deeper level core belief that I was holding about myself connected to this belief up at the top. And
Right.
so maybe the belief up here was, yeah, I'm too vanilla or boring, or I'm not meant to be, the main star. And then it's like spiraling down to this belief. I'm like, well, then why would you even bother trying to do this thing? And I
Mhm.
think that was the belief that was actually the problem. So pushing back and experimenting with that and putting myself out there and just um kind of course correcting, right? Like trying little steps, seeing how people respond, how I feel about myself, and then
Right.
putting the next foot.
And there's such a fine balance between not changing who we are, but growing past our comfort zone. And I
Yeah.
feel like we've probably all made those mistakes. And maybe you could share a little bit if you've had an experience. This was where you step out of your comfort zone thinking, well, this is what I need to do. And you're like, wait, that's just not me. That wasn't a good fit versus no, I step out of my comfort zone and it was worth it and I grew.
Yeah. I think yeah, there's a lot. I feel like starting a business kind of just like thrusts these things upon us, but
Mhm.
we're kind of skipping ahead here, but like testing out the open houses for a while, like that was me pushing outside of my comfort zone for that piece of it. But then it was 2 years ago, I think, when I had the idea to do the little reality show competition concept. And for that one, absolutely, like I was thinking, oh, I don't even like it doesn't have to be me at all. I don't even, I just want to put pieces together, have other people be a part of it. But also for the sake of this is my business, I should probably represent it at some level. So
Right.
having to push outside of my comfort zone in that way, I think was a really positive experience for me to know that, like, okay, yes, it's important to do and I can do it. But in the future, I can definitely see kind of like transitioning that into other people. But
Sure. Yeah, it doesn't have to
definitely,
be the main part of your job as the business grows. It can be okay, I'll do this enough. I'll get a little uncomfortable and that'll be the first thing I'll hire out. Or
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
that's fair. Well, why don't you give us a rundown on what your business is? We've teased people enough. We've talked about these
Yeah.
pop-up markets. Let
Yeah.
us know, what that is, where the dream's going, how it started,
Where the
all
dream's
the
going.
things.
Yeah. Well, it's been a dream in the making for a while. I had this idea conceptually as really consumer sounds so official, but just like as a person, in the
Hmm.
world, not necessarily as like a real estate agent or a business owner or anything like that. Just as someone who really enjoys going to markets, any kind of market where there's, people selling things that either they've made or a service that they have. And also someone who enjoys going to open houses. And I was at an event, and this was years ago. This was I mean, obviously, like conventions and night markets and things like that have been popular for a long time, but I don't think at the time the word pop-up shop was as common as it is now. Like now I
Right.
feel like, I mean, there's pop-up shops all over and all these different collaborations and it's amazing to watch. Um but back then I had gone to an event and I was all excited and it was at the Puyallup Fairgrounds and it was an event that charged a cover to get in and it was all these makers who were, I think it was called like the Pinology market or something like that. Like people that were, like on Pinterest or inspired by Pinterest. And I brought my husband and he's like, okay, like I'll, whatever you want, we'll go have a good day here. But we literally had to wait in line. It was like 20 minutes just to get in. We paid our cover, got inside, and it was so packed, which is great, right? Like if you're a vendor, you're like,
Right.
that's what you want to see, all this foot traffic and people are just smushing in there. And I had a friend who was going to be vending at the event. I'm like, okay, well, I'll go check out her booth and see what she has to offer. But as we were walking through the event, it was, and this is pre-COVID, so it was just like so packed that I had actually started to get a little bit claustrophobic, which is unusual for me. Like I don't mind crowds, but it was tight and trying to interact with the different vendors was tricky because there were so many people there and it was just
Right.
like this I mean obviously it was a really fabulous event. Like
Yeah,
they
I'm
should
sure it
be
was
very proud
great
of
for
themselves.
sales. Right.
Right, yeah, and
Yeah.
people paying to get in there. But what I realized was, okay, a lot of these vendors, they weren't selling the same things and they were all handcrafted, but essentially they were competing with each other for the shopper's dollars. Like if
Right.
I go to that event, like okay, I have a budget at some level, I can't buy something from every single person that's here. So they are it it makes sense because there's a synergy. You're attracting that type of buyer who wants to buy something there, but then you have all these different choices. So it's competitive, but it's also synergistic. And it works for that larger event. But that night, I was thinking about open houses that I'd been to, and what a beautiful blank canvas, of an event that is, where you might have this gorgeous home and maybe it's staged or partially staged. And as a real estate agent, the goal is you're trying to really show off the value of the home and get as many people in the door to see it, to
Right.
talk about it, to spend more time there. And I had just pictured my friend's business inside, a beautiful home where I was thinking,
Mhm.
wow, that'd be kind of like the infomercial of vending events where like she's not competing with 100 other
Right.
vendors,
It's like when, yeah,
but
when you're watching that infomercial and you're in your own living room and they're basically in a living room, they're right there one-on-one sharing.
yes. And yeah, and the piece of it that I think is really important too is that brand story. So people not just wanting to connect with the product or the service that's being sold, but that the person who represents their business and knowing why they do what they do and getting to know yeah, their brand voice really in a way and like feeling more emotionally connected to them as a business owner and then wanting to support their business from there. So it was kind of a random like, oh, that'd be really fun. Like I would totally go to an open house if they were going to have like I was picturing my friends business inside like the primary bedroom where it's just helping to bring more engagement to that space and you get to build a relationship there and you're trying to think of like what business matches what room of the house organically, so it kind of flows and makes sense. But
Right.
um like she had like hair accessories and things like that I'm thinking, okay, in the primary bedroom and maybe there's an ensuite bathroom, like you could have actually try on some of the products, but now you're imagining like, oh, well, what if I lived here? And this is kind of what it would be like trying on things. And I'm spending more time and putting myself in the shoes of someone who actually was using the home in a real way. But it's like light bulb moment. Like, what does it just have to be that? I mean, think of all the rooms in the house and like what types of businesses would make sense to bring each room to life in ways where the vendors aren't necessarily competing with
Sure.
each other directly.
Yeah, you don't have five different candle vendors, one in each
Yeah,
room.
right. Yes. I mean, I've never tried that, but
Right.
hopefully, yeah, you're kind of getting a balance of totally different types of concepts. And then the business owners themselves can actually be I think, like wingmen for each other so
Hmm.
they can actually help cross promote each other and not feel competitive.
Yeah, and I've worked a few of the events, and so just for people listening and trying to picture this, you're walking into an open house where a home is for sale, and there are little pop-ups kind of hidden throughout the house, sometimes near each other, sometimes spread out. And it's a great chance, just even like for me to have met other artists, other local businesses. How do you, how have you, how has that benefit the home seller, the home buyer, the vendors? How does that relationship work together? I think for a lot of people, this is such a new concept that it's
Yeah.
hard to get our heads around. How's that
Why?
work? Or what's the good of it other than it's a fun
Yeah.
event? How does that work
Yeah.
for everybody involved?
Yeah. I honestly, I think that's a probably one of the most important questions because shifting gears from thinking of it as like, oh, this would be fun to attend as like a shopper to, okay, wow, I have four different target audiences that I'm trying to make sure everybody gets value. And the home seller, number one, they have to get value. The home buyer coming through the event, they have to get value. The business owner who's attending, they have to get value. And then the real estate agent obviously has to get
Right.
value out of it. So there's four different value propositions essentially. And it really was fun for me because taking it from like just a conceptual hypothetical idea and then actually walking through like, oh, this totally does make sense for the home seller. And the goal, I mean, if you're trying to sell your property and you're working with an agent, you want to draw attention to the special features of the home, something that sets it apart, or things about the community that you really want to highlight if there's a home buyer who's thinking about moving to that neighborhood or that area, wanting to find ways to, a, like if you're having an open house, wanting to attract as many people as possible to come to that event. And then once they're there, wanting them to stay as long as possible. And I don't know that that has always, I mean, it's a goal with an open house, but as a home buyer in the past, like I also know that experience of like, okay, well, we've got like, we're gonna try to hit 5 open houses today. We're gonna go, we're gonna do the walkthrough, boom, boom, boom. Okay, we saw the bedrooms, kitchen, that was cool. On to the next one. And sometimes it can be kind of hard. Like it gets a little blurry trying to remember exactly, what differentiated one from the next. So from the home seller's perspective, if they're trying to get inside the mind of the home buyer and say, how do we get them to come? How do we get them to spend more time? How do we get them to connect with the house and create more tangible sensory memories beyond just, yep, 3 bed, two
Right.
bath. That,
That's such a good
that's
point because I've been on those home tours where at the end of the day, it's like, I forgot to take notes. Was that the one with
yeah, yeah,
you give each house a nickname. Was that the one with the weird
yeah,
kitchen or the ugly bathroom or whatever? And so to have this, oh, that was the one that had the artist there. And remember they had this
yes,
thing because they were by the sink. And
yes,
that's such a good way to appeal to more, because like you said, when you're appealing to more sensory for memory, it's cementing it even more.
yeah. Yeah, and I think I mean this kind of goes back to me feeling vanilla, but there are so many amazing business owners. I mean, I live in Tacoma, so just meeting people locally here, but then I imagine like if we were doing this in other areas, how many people are doing cool things that really can help bring that whole experience to life. And the benefit to the home buyer then as they're coming through, like the hope is that they're already starting to build connections, build relationships with people in the community. And
Oh,
I
right.
think um that's really been an inspiring part, I think, too, when people, it's like, yeah, you're buying this property, but you're not just buying the building materials of it. It is a whole community. And if there are people that work and live, in that neighborhood and they are entrepreneurs, they have their own business or do art or music or whatever service that is, bringing them inside the home and then they can start to connect. I think of it like in a pretty authentic way. Like I get that an open house is still a little bit, it's not just like, hey, we're having the neighbors over for a party. Like it's a little bit more structured, but being in a house and having it be, a little bit more intimate still to me feels like a more authentic connection than if you were at like, a corporate event or something like that, networking or meeting
Right.
people.
Yeah. So you mentioned the artists, the buyers, the sellers. How do the agents really, how does this make sense for them?
Yeah. Well, for the agents, if you're hosting open houses, it's kind of not to get too far in the weeds, but either you're representing the house, like you are representing the seller, and so you're there to bring as many
Right.
potential buyers to that property as possible. Sometimes there are agents that post for the listing agent because let's say somebody wants to put an offer on the house, they might need representation. So
Sure.
it would be a conflict of interest potentially if the person representing the seller then was also representing the buyer. So for me, like I'll host for other listing agents. So if someone does come through and they need representation, that we can represent them and we can work together in that way. But it's been a really great way to set myself apart as an agent. And again, my hope is also working with other agents who want to differentiate themselves by elevating the open house experience, helping to attract more attention, obviously, on the house. That helps you build your relationships in the community and with potential home buyers. But the micro networking, I think, has been a huge part of this. I mean, every event that I do, I try to incorporate different aspects. I mean, obviously, you're one of my favorite pop-up professionals. I would have you at every event if you were available.
We
But
won't tell anybody. No.
I think because I mean, like what you have to offer, I think makes so much sense for people that are considering buying a house. Like, and you're a really good example of kind of a role model pop-up professional, right? Like trying to think of how do I think of my business and how I want to connect with these potential customers, and whether they're home buyers or even being able to customize offers for real estate agents or the other business owners who you're also connecting with there. Side note, I also love how you like stage your products throughout the house too. Like you have your books maybe set up in the main room, but some of the apparel or things hanging up in the closets throughout the house, so people get to like see that
Yeah, that's
brand
true.
every.
I do like to leave little Easter egg hunts. And also sometimes I feel like when people are right in front of you, they don't want to look at your product too much. There's a little pressure. So sometimes I
Yep.
think, well, if they see my book on the
Yes.
nightstand next to the
Yes.
bed, maybe they'll flip it up and go, oh, that's what was in the living room. I'll look now while he's not looking.
Yeah.
So it's fun. Plus, it does kind of like for me, it's a new challenge. Okay, where are the places? If there's a desk, I can throw a book on the desk, or if there's like you
Yeah.
mentioned a closet, I'll throw my shirts in there. So all of a sudden, it's like, oh, and you're awkward in your
Yes.
face. And
Yes. Uh, and but that's the type of concept where I get excited to work with people who are so creative and think outside the box. And I mean, I've really appreciated that with you too, where you were like, hey, yeah, I don't really know what you're talking about, but I'll go give it a shot, and like you jump in there and just make it work for you. And those are the types of people that I feel like I've been really fortunate to connect with through this whole
yeah.
endeavor.
Now, this is a really different type of event to walk into. So when buyers walk in, how how is that? Are they like, oh, this is a bit much, or I didn't know what I was walking into, or I heard about it and I was excited to come. Like
Yeah,
maybe a little bit of
it's
everything.
a little bit of everything. My hope, my dream for the
Mhm.
future is obviously that people are coming specifically for this type of event, that they are going to the website to look, wow, here are the open houses that also feature local business owners and artists and musicians. Currently, we're still building up to that. A lot of the people that show up at open houses are just finding them generically on online real estate accounts, and so they don't know necessarily what they're walking into. I try to catch people outside and welcome them as they're walking up to the house, and just like, hey, oh my gosh, so glad you made it. How did you actually hear about our open house today? And sometimes they actually follow one of our pop-up professionals online, and
Mhm.
that's another benefit to the real estate agent too. Like when you're promoting these events, you're now tagging the other business owners who are going to be there. They're sharing it to their own audience
Right.
also.
Yeah, I was just
So
talking to somebody about that a couple days ago about how there's this a lot of times people measure the event based on, how many people did you talk to that day? How busy was the event? And I
yeah,
said, well, you have to also realize there's an online presence that goes with every event that I do. So
yeah,
whether or not I sell the amount of products, it's all, it is about sales and business. There's numbers that I need and want to get to. However, there are metrics outside of that where it's like, I do an event on a Saturday and if I see 20 people, that's great. but there could be 200 people that now saw the marketing that I was going to be at this event that are now also exposed to me that might be going, oh, I couldn't make it to that event, or I lived too far away, or, whatever,
Right.
had a kid's softball team. And now but now I'm interested in those vendors that I saw on that flyer.
Yeah. No, I think that is a really good point. And hopefully it's a balance, hopefully that kind of builds on itself too. The more of that online opportunity and presence there is, then it does hopefully translate into the in-person. But I think one of the last events we were at together, somebody showed up, and I do usually ask where they heard about, and they're like, I'm here to see so and so. And it was like somebody that was featured at the event. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay,
Like,
that's pretty
okay, well,
cool. I'm like,
you're like, that's
I
what I've
don't know.
wanted. I wasn't ready for it, but
Yeah. But it's working, right? Like they heard about it through that person's social media and showed up to the event to connect with them.
yeah,
And I think it ended up being a really good overall connection with that person. But I think it might be a stretch goal that people are showing up specifically for that. But the more the more I can get the word out that this is what we're doing, I would say anecdotally 99-ish% of the home buyers that come through, when I explain what it is, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm glad you saw this on Zillow or whatever. But
yeah,
like, we do our open houses a little bit different. We like to bring more engagement into the space and connect home buyers with local business owners in the community. And there's like that microsecond where people are like, what? And then they're like, oh, as they walk in, like I've kind of prepped them, hopefully, as they are about to enter the house. And then they see, I'm like, okay, actually, this is pretty cool. Like there's value that each of the different business owners is bringing to that event.
mhm,
So they're walking away with a little bit more of that. And yeah, I think I've heard from those people too, where then they go, maybe they talk to their neighbor who's thinking about selling their house, and like, oh my gosh, like, wouldn't it be cool if you imagined who would your favorite business owner or artist be
right,
that could be in your home promoting to their own audience to really make your house look extra special. And um open houses, I think traditionally they do a really good job. People get to walk through and check it out on their own. But if I was selling my house and somebody was like, hey, who's your favorite business owner in your neighborhood? Who would you want to absolutely make sure that somebody moving here had a connection to? For me to be able to go to our website and search for like, oh my gosh, my favorite business owner is on the list here. We could invite them. How honored I would feel that they would attend, to help sell
yeah.
and promote my house. I think that would be
And
really
and there
special.
really is an element of that too, because you do see that interaction where potential buyers are walking through, and just naturally the people that are there hanging out all day are, man, did you see the hot tub in the backyard? Did you check out the fire pit? Because we all have a
Yes.
different thing that gets us excited about that home. So now instead of just one agent trying to guess what this family might be interested in, you've got people just sharing their favorite little, did you notice this cool
Yes.
little cabinet under the sink? Like, I didn't even know they made those. And yeah,
Yes. You are really good at that too. I feel like you always notice things about that. And as an agent, sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Like that is a really helpful perspective
yeah,
there. But
I've been shopping at some of these events where I'm like, okay, what do I want? What do I now care about, or what do I need in my home or want that I didn't know? What do I now
right.
need, quote unquote, that I
Yeah.
didn't know I needed after seeing all these
A vision
different
board.
options? Yeah.
Yeah.
I just have to say, Ali, you, I have to give you credit because you started this business, and you shared at the beginning of the story from going to the market where it's super crowded, having this vision, and then and if correct me if I'm wrong, but then it's almost like here's this idea, and then later it's like it wasn't like how do I make a business is what I want to do. It was here's this idea, this is
Yeah.
a cool concept, and then realized there is value as a business.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. I definitely wasn't brainstorming like, oh, how do I build something around this concept? It was very niche in the sense that it was a customer of one. I was like, I would
Uh-huh.
like this product. But
Mhm.
if I would like this product, as putting myself in the shoes of a home buyer, putting myself in the shoes of a business owner, putting myself in the shoes of all the different categories, right? Even the home seller, like this is something that if I was selling my house, I would want. There's no extra cost if you're working with one of our agents in our database on Infinterest.com. Like this is a service that we provide as a part of our regular agreement, which obviously it costs money to work with an agent, but there's no additional fee to have this type of pop-up shop
Mm-hmm.
part of the marketing package, really. So I guess I started with that. And like, if I see value in it on my own in each of those four categories, there logically must be other people out there, hopefully, that would see the value. So I just kind of got to work, like going to networking meetings and chatting with people and trying to get feedback to see if it was something that they would see value in.
I love that. I see the value. I remember when you were first explaining this to me, and I'm sure you get this a lot where it's like, okay, I'm trying to picture this. I'm not poo-pooing it. I'm just trying to understand it, especially from a business standpoint. When we do things that are out of the box, it's really
Yeah.
hard to understand how all the players fit in, how it makes
Yeah.
sense, how the finances are going to play out. Um, the one thing I didn't warn you about this, but we're going to get into being an entrepreneur and dealing with adversity because you started this not only at the beginning or in the middle of a pandemic
Yeah.
when people couldn't even go to open houses. So the thing that your business is centered around isn't even
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
And unique to our area, Pierce County, where we live, for at least, I mean, I want to say a couple years in a row, was the hottest real estate market in the
Yeah.
US. So open houses were barely even able to happen
Yeah.
because the home was on the
House were
market for
flying
like, a day and then it's
wild.
closed
Yeah.
within 4 days. And you stuck it through all that. And so talk about those challenges, what it's how you get through that when you have this dream and all this, and it seems like the cards are stacked against you.
Yeah. It's funny to think back. Like that was, I mean, it seems like a lifetime ago. And obviously I see it through the lens of my own, like, did you know that COVID impacted my business? Like I
Right.
get that it impacted a lot of businesses, but yeah, I really had a very legitimate concern that open houses were not going to be a thing at all. Like even after COVID passed, because the market was so strong and it was so hot that I'm like, we're not doing open houses and houses are still selling.
Right.
So where are we going with this? But what happened during COVID is that we, as an industry, we did push for limited capacity open houses, and we just had to take a lot of precautions. And it's like, you know what? Okay, if people are pushing that hard, they are seeing the value. People want to be able to walk through the home and experience that before they're making their purchases. And just went for it. It was like, okay, we have to wear our masks. And I remember like we could only have 5 people in a home at a time. I'm like, well, 3 of them are artists. So I guess we're letting 2 home buyers in at a time. And I'd have to like check people in and out. And like, okay, that group left so we can let the next one in. And there was like a line of people waiting to get in. And some of this was like, winter. And yeah, there were a lot of things that were kind of working against it. But the the motivating part for me really was like, I like being able to have that moment of explaining it to a home buyer and watching them shift from like, huh? Like this is confusing to, oh, actually this is really cool and how fun. And oh, my cousin does so and so. Like, could they be a part of this? I'm like, yeah, we would love, to meet your cousin and have them build a profile on the website, connect them with other real estate agents and you know, keep that like collaboration in the community going. And things probably would have been different if everybody was super negative about it. But there was enough positivity that it it made me feel like there is something here. And I think that people do appreciate that. And my hope with the business is to actually make it a win for each of those parties. Like I want it to be a win for the home seller. I want them to be like, wow, this agent that, represented my house really has solid connections in the community and they knew like who was going to be a good fit for this property. And I want it to be a win for the home buyers. I want them to walk through feeling like, wow, I felt really comfortable in at home. I did stay a little bit longer. I met some really cool people. And there were, sometimes businesses that'll show up and do, my friend who had an HVAC company was actually like giving little tours of the home and like what to look for with like HVAC stuff,
Right.
and I'm like, that's a little out of my scope, but it was really helpful to have him there and add that value for the home buyers. And I think agents, if you're going to be hosting an open house, if that's part of your marketing plan, or maybe it wasn't part of your marketing plan because you're like, I don't want to just sit in a house by myself, for 3 hours and hope that people come. This is a way to, it's not harder. It's actually, it just makes it more engaging and more fun. Like, you're already doing the open house, bring in the people intentionally that can help bring it to life. And you get to network with the people who were there, which can also be really valuable. And it ideally it is setting you apart when people walk through, like, oh, this agent knows people, like they're connected in the community, and hopefully they have resources. So
Right. Yeah, that's such an important piece of, if you want to buy from somebody, if you want to work with somebody, seeing how they work with other people and seeing that they are connected. It's
yeah.
a firsthand testimonial. So how has your vanilla-ness played into getting through the challenges, to pulling people together, to just making this all, that word versatility comes to mind. Like, how
Yeah.
has that played into this working out for you the way it's worked out?
I'm really, actually, right now I'm very thankful that I am as vanilla as I am, because I do wonder if there would be part of me that would be more toxically competitive if I wasn't the way that I am. And like, there's nothing wrong with competition, but I think starting this business and being like comfortable with my little vanilla scoop over here, um, it makes it less threatening for me to reach out to the people, even like other agents, right? Who are like really good at what they do. And it's a very competitive industry. And I think it could be easy to fall into the like, oh, well, they're really cool, but like, I don't want to work with them because I want to be the star over here. So for me, I'm like, no, I love being able to reach out to people like, you're a star, cool. Let's connect, because I want this to be about you doing your thing, setting yourself apart. And then also, you probably know some really cool people too. So if you invite your network of business owners,
Right.
artists, musicians that want to come and also be stars, like, cool. I'll just kind of be over here, and you guys are like,
I'll
it's
just make
so
it
fun to
happen.
watch.
And yeah, I absolutely love that. And I think that's something that you are very good at. And I think we need to put an end to the idea that vanilla is boring, because you're not boring, you're fun.
Oh,
You have those things, like, just because we see something on the surface, it's like, okay, well, that might be how someone, oh, you're vanilla, but how much fun can you have with vanilla? I mean, it's the basis of a hot fudge sundae, which I just have to say,
exactly.
you can't have it without it. So
Yep,
anyway,
yep.
that's my dessert reference
Thank
for
you.
the day.
I'll take it. No, and I think it's about time. I might go get myself a little scoop after this,
I
and
think I think you should. Before you go, how can people find you, support you, and what's the best way to really get
yeah.
on board and get behind what you're doing?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned earlier, there's different categories of how I work with people, and always I'm looking to work with home sellers. If you're thinking about selling your house and you would like to work with an agent who can provide this type of service and really bring extra attention and engagement to your property, you can reach out through our website, Infinterest.com. There is a drop down specifically for home sellers. We can connect there and see if it's a good fit. If you are an awesome business owner or artist or musician who's interested in popping up at an open house, I also have a special code for you to create a free profile, again, on Infinterest.com. And that's free for life. Right now, it won't be forever, but that's kind of like the way that, think of it like a dating site. Like, you build your profile on there and you select different criteria that would like help an agent or a home seller find your business, like your zip code, geography, business category, even like what room of the house you'd want to be featured. You're building all of that into your profile, and then the agent can search specifically for like, oh, this is the perfect fit for this gourmet kitchen and this luxury listing we're selling. So business owners can create their free profile on Infinterest.com. We'll have the
All the links are
special
right below in the,
special
yep, they're all linked right
bonus
here
comment.
in the description on whatever channel you're watching this on. So be sure to
All the
click that.
channels. Yes.
Yeah.
And then agents also, I'm always looking to connect with more agents that enjoy hosting open houses and want to learn how to do these on your own. So again, website would be a place to connect, Infinterest.com. But we are on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok,
All
Twitter.
the
Yeah, it's
things.
all, yeah, all of
Perfect.
them.
Find, connect, follow, support, share, all that good stuff. it means a lot. And that's one thing as a small business owner, there's so much we can do to support each other that doesn't even come out of our pocketbook. Just getting the word out is so helpful. So, Ali, before we go, one last thing. What's one thing people can do right now today to own their awkward?
Oh, yeah. Andy, okay, I'm going to go back to mine. I think step one, yeah, identifying what that thing is, what the awkward thing is. And this is drawing on my therapist roots, but I think if we have somehow drawn the conclusion that our awkward thing is somehow perceived as a negative, I think challenging that thought and being like, okay, what is the worst case scenario that could possibly happen if I just leaned into it and owned that as a strength, and looking at what is the best case, what do I have to gain from actually just allowing that to be my truth, and weighing those things together. Hopefully the pros outweigh the cons, and it just gives your brain a safe path forward to giving it a shot.
I absolutely love that. We can all use a safe path forward. That comfort makes it easier to move forward. So, Ali, thank you so very much. I absolutely love everything you're doing. I can't wait to see more pop-up markets happening all over the place in open houses and watch Infinterest grow. So thank you so very much.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for being such a huge support too. I love having you at our events.
Thank you. Everybody else, be sure you go out there this week. Follow Ali, follow Infinterest, talk to your agents about doing this in your market, get your local favorite vendors in there, go to some pop-ups, and of course, as always, own your awkward. Thank you so much for listening in for today's show. Be sure to visit awkwardcareer.com to continue your journey, and of course, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends so they can find their awkward side and learn how to own it.